She used to sell sweets on the corner, but when the billionaire found her crying, he invited her to the most expensive restaurant in the city. Little did she know that this meeting would change her life forever. The deafening roar of the cars and the incessant buzz of the crowd swallowed up Rosalie Bennett's muffled sobs. Leaning against the cold red brick wall on the corner of 5th Avenue and 23rd Street in New York, she struggled to hold back the tears that stubbornly streamed down her freckled face. Her trembling fingers clutched the worn handle of the wicker basket filled with homemade sweets that had found no takers on that grey autumn day. At only 23, Rosalie was already carrying the weight of the world on her narrow shoulders. Orphaned since the age of 16, she had left her small town in rural Kansas with nothing but a battered backpack, ambitious dreams, and her grandmother's recipes. New York promised opportunities, but so far had only given her hard sidewalks and indifferent looks. As she tried to regain her composure, Rosalie didn't notice the imposing figure approaching. Ellis Reeves, 38, CEO of one of the country's largest technology companies, was striding along, his impeccable three-piece suit standing out from the mass of hurrying pedestrians. His shrewd eyes, used to spotting business opportunities, caught something unusual in that everyday scene. "Miss, is everything all right?" Ellis' deep, melodious voice rose above the urban chaos, making Rosalie look up, surprised by the sudden attention. I'm fine, thank you," she stammered, quickly wiping away the tears with the back of her free hand. Her green eyes, still watery, met the worried gaze of the well-dressed stranger. Ellis frowned, his normally serious expression softening at the young woman's obvious distress. "Forgive me for intruding, but I don't think everything is all right. Can I help you in any way?" Rosalie hesitated, torn between her wounded pride and her desperate need to get something off her chest. It's been a hard day," she muttered, indicating with a despondent gesture the basket still full of sweets. "Nobody wants to buy sweets on a day like this, I guess." The businessman looked at the basket with genuine interest. "These sweets look delicious. Why don't you tell me more about them? I know a great place nearby where we could talk more comfortably." The proposal took Rosalie by surprise. Her instincts told her to be wary of strangers, especially in a city like New York. However, there was something in Ellis' gaze, a mixture of curiosity and compassion, that made her hesitate. "I don't know. I don't want to bother you, and I'm sure you must be busy," she replied, uncertain. Ellis smiled, a rare gesture that completely transformed his stern face. "Believe me, Miss Rosalie Bennett. Miss Bennett, I've spent the whole day in boring meetings with people who only talk about numbers and graphs. A chat about homemade sweets would be a welcome change." Against all logic, Rosalie found herself smiling back. "Well, if you insist, but where exactly are we going?" "Oh, I know a little restaurant nearby. The chef is an old friend. I'm sure he'd be delighted to taste your pastries," Ellis replied, making an elegant gesture towards the street. "I must warn you, it's a rather exclusive place. But don't worry, you're with me." As they walked side by side along the busy sidewalk, Rosalie couldn't help but notice the curious glances they attracted. Her, in her simple dress and basket of sweets, next to this man who exuded power and sophistication. It was as if they had come from completely different worlds, colliding by chance on this New York street corner. The little restaurant mentioned by Ellis turned out to be Le Bernardin, one of the most renowned and expensive establishments in the city. Rosalie felt her stomach sink at the sight of the elegant and discreet facade. "Mr. Reeves, I can't go in there," she whispered, stopping abruptly. I'm not dressed properly. And I definitely can't afford anything here." Ellis looked at her with an amused expression. "First, please call me Ellis. And secondly, don't worry about any of this. You're with me, remember? Besides," he added with a conspiratorial smile, "I bet your sweets will be more of a hit in here than any dish on the menu." Before Rosalie could protest again, Ellis gently guided her into the restaurant. The maitre d', a middle-aged man with a meticulously trimmed moustache, widened his eyes at the sight of the unlikely pair, but quickly pulled himself together. "Mr. Reeves, what a pleasure to welcome you again. Your usual table is ready," he said softly, casting a curious glance at Rosalie and her basket. As they were led through the elegantly decorated hall, Rosalie felt completely out of place. The other customers, all impeccably dressed, made no effort to disguise their curiosity. She clutched the basket to her chest as if it were a shield. Seated at the table, with the soft light of the candles dancing between them, Ellis leaned forward, his eyes shining with genuine interest. "So, Rosalie Bennett, tell me your story. How does a talented young woman like you end up selling sweets on the corner in New York?" Rosalie hesitated, playing nervously with her linen napkin. For a moment, she considered making up a story, something more appropriate for this luxurious setting. But there was something in Ellis' gaze, a sincerity that completely disarmed her. "It's a long story," she began, her voice low but firm. "It all started in a little kitchen in Kansas, with my grandmother teaching me how to make the best apple cake you've ever tasted in your life." As Rosalie spoke, Ellis listened attentively, asking occasional questions and laughing at the funny bits. Time seemed to have stopped in that bubble of soft light and whispered conversations. For the first time in months, Rosalie felt truly seen and heard. What neither of them knew, as they shared stories and tasted Rosalie's homemade pastries to the chef's secret delight, was that this impromptu dinner at Le Bernardin was only the beginning. Fate had conspired to bring two lonely souls together on that busy New York street corner, and the ramifications of this encounter would be deeper and more lasting than either of them could have imagined. The weeks that followed that unusual dinner at Le Bernardin passed like a whirlwind for Rosalie. Life that had previously seemed stagnant in a routine of disappointments now took on vibrant colors and unexpected possibilities. Ellis, true to his word, not only tasted Rosalie's pastries that night, but also committed to helping her turn her talent into a viable business. With his vast network of contacts and knowledge of the business world, he opened doors that Rosalie had never imagined possible. On a sunny Saturday morning, the two of them were walking through the bustling Chelsea market. Rosalie, in her simple but elegant floral dress, a gift from Ellis, gazed in wonder at the many artisan food stalls. "Can you imagine having a space like this?" Ellis asked, his eyes shining with the excitement of a mentor seeing his protégé's potential. Rosalie hesitated, her gaze roaming over the elegant shop windows and the sophisticated customers. "It's a beautiful dream, Alex, but it seems so far from my reality." Ellis stopped, turning to face her. His face, normally serious when dealing with business, softened. "Rosalie, you have an extraordinary gift. Your sweets don't just taste good. They tell a story, they bring back memories. That's exactly what people are looking for these days, authenticity." Ellis' words warmed Rosalie's heart, but a shadow of doubt still hung in her green eyes. "What if I fail? What if all your investment is in vain?" Ellis smiled, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Do you know why I believe in you so much, Rosalie? Because I see in your eyes the same determination that drove me when I started. The difference is that you're not alone on this journey." At that moment, surrounded by the buzz of the market, something subtly changed between them. Ellis' touch, once casual and friendly, seemed to carry an electric current. Rosalie felt her heart race, confused by the intensity of the moment. "Shall we go for a coffee?" Ellis suggested, breaking the charged silence. "I know a great place nearby." As they walked side by side through the busy streets of Chelsea, Rosalie couldn't help but reflect on how drastically her life had changed in such a short space of time. Just a month ago, she could barely pay the rent on her tiny apartment in the Bronx. Now she was discussing business plans with one of New York's most successful entrepreneurs. The cafe Ellis chose was a charming establishment on the corner, with rustic wooden tables and an irresistible aroma of freshly roasted beans. Sitting in a cozy corner with their steaming cups in front of them, the conversation flowed naturally into more personal topics. "You've never told me much about your family, Alex," Rosalie commented, sipping her cappuccino. "What was your childhood like?" Ellis' face twitched almost imperceptibly. "There's not much to tell, really. My parents, well, let's just say they were more interested in their careers than raising a child." Rosalie reached out instinctively, touching Ellis's hand on the table. "I'm sorry. It must have been hard." Ellis looked down at their joined hands, a small smile forming on his lips. But it made me who I am today. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to fight for it alone. You're not alone anymore, Alex, Rosalie said softly, surprising herself with the boldness of her words. The look Ellis threw her made her heart skip a beat. There was a vulnerability there that she had never seen before, an openness that contrasted sharply with her usual controlled posture. "Neither have you, Rosalie," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. The moment was interrupted by the shrill ring of Ellis' cell phone. He frowned as he saw his name on the screen. "Sorry, I have to take this," he said, standing up quickly. Rosalie watched as he turned away to talk on the phone, his posture visibly changing. His shoulders tensed, his voice took on a harsher tone. Whoever was on the other end of the line was clearly not bringing good news. When Ellis returned to the table, his expression was grim. "Rosalie, I'm sorry, but an emergency has arisen at work. I need to go." "Of course, I understand," she replied, trying to hide her disappointment. "Is everything all right?" Ellis hesitated for a moment. "It's complicated. I promise to explain everything later, okay?" Before Rosalie could reply, he leaned over and placed a soft kiss on her cheek. The gesture, as unexpected as it was welcome, left her speechless. "I'll call you later," Ellis promised, hurrying away. Rosalie sat there alone in the cafe, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, her heart sang with the closeness she was developing with Ellis. On the other, an insistent voice in her head reminded her of the stark differences between their worlds. As she walked back to her apartment, now in a considerably better neighborhood thanks to Ellis' help, Rosalie couldn't help but wonder what exactly she was getting herself into. The chemistry between them was undeniable. But was there room for genuine romance in the midst of business plans and corporate obligations? When she arrived home, Rosalie went straight to the small kitchen. Cooking had always been her refuge, her way of processing complex emotions. While her skilled hands mixed ingredients for a new cookie recipe, her mind wandered. The sound of a notification on her cell phone brought her out of her reverie. It was a message from Ellis. "Sorry again about today. Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night? I have something important to discuss." Rosalie stared at the screen, her heart racing. Something in his tone, even through a simple text message, seemed loaded with meaning. With trembling fingers, she typed her reply. "I'd love to. Where and what time?" The reply came almost instantly. "I'll come and pick you up at 7 p.m. Wear something elegant." Rosalie reread the message several times, a mixture of excitement and apprehension forming in her chest. What did Ellis have to discuss that required so much mystery? As the aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the apartment, Rosalie found herself daydreaming about the possibilities the next day might bring. But a part of her, the cautious part formed by years of disappointments, reminded her not to get too excited. After all, in the city that never sleeps, dreams can turn into nightmares in the blink of an eye. And Rosalie Bennett, the Kansas girl with family recipes and a heart full of hope, was about to discover that not everything in New York is what it seems. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, as Rosalie put the finishing touches to her makeup. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman transformed, not just by the navy blue dress that fell perfectly over her curves, or the heels she had borrowed from her neighbor, but by the sparkle of expectation in her green eyes. At 7 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Rosalie took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach, before opening the door. Ellis was there, imposing in his tailored suit, a bouquet of white lilies in his hands. His eyes scanned Rosalie from top to bottom, an appreciative smile forming on his lips. "You look stunning," he said, his voice husky with admiration. Rosalie blushed, accepting the flowers. "Thank you, Alex. You look very elegant yourself." The journey to the restaurant was made in a luxurious Bentley, with a silent chauffeur at the wheel. Ellis seemed tense, constantly checking his cell phone. "Is everything all right?" Rosalie asked, concerned. Ellis put the device away, forcing a smile. "Yes, just some work issues. Tonight is about us, I promise." The restaurant was the kind of place Rosalie had only seen in movies, an exclusive establishment at the top of a skyscraper, with panoramic views of the city. As they were led to their table, Rosalie noticed the curious glances of the other customers, clearly recognizing Ellis. Once they were seated, with glasses of expensive champagne in front of them, Ellis finally relaxed a little. "Rosalie, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart raced. Was this the moment he would confess his feelings? Or perhaps he had some bad news about his confectionery project. "Do you remember the call yesterday?" Ellis continued, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "It was about a possible hostile takeover of my company." Rosalie blinked, confused. "Hostile takeover? What does that mean exactly?" Ellis sighed, running a hand through his perfectly combed hair. "It means that a group of investors is trying to buy enough shares to take control of the company against my will." The gravity of the situation gradually became clear to Rosalie. "This is terrible, Alex. What can we do?" The use of "we can" didn't go unnoticed by Ellis, who smiled genuinely for the first time all evening. "That's why you're special, Rosalie. Always thinking of us." He reached across the table, entwining his fingers with hers. "The truth is, I need your help. More than that, I need your understanding." Rosalie squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. "For the next few weeks, maybe months, I'll be completely immersed in this corporate battle. Last-minute trips, endless meetings, sleepless nights." Ellis paused, his eyes searching hers. "It won't be easy for us." Rosalie's heart squeezed. Part of her wanted to shout that she didn't care, that she would wait as long as it took. But another part, the part that still bore the scars of shattered dreams, hesitated. "Alex, she began, but was interrupted by the arrival of the waiter with the main courses. Dinner continued, the conversation flowing between lighter topics, but the underlying tension was palpable. Rosalie could sense that there was more Ellis wasn't saying. When dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate dish that was nothing like Rosalie's homemade sweets, Ellis finally approached the elephant in the room. "There's another matter we need to discuss," he said, his expression serious. "About your confectionery business." Rosalie felt a lump form in her throat. "What about it?" "With everything that's going on, I won't be able to devote myself as much as I'd like to the project, and there are complications." "What kind of complications?" Rosalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellis hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "My personal involvement with you could be seen as problematic by the investors. They could claim a conflict of interest." Rosalie's world seemed to slow down. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we should postpone the launch of your bakery, just until this situation with the company is resolved." Rosalie felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. All her dreams, so close to coming true, seemed to be slipping through her fingers like sand. "What about us?" she heard herself ask, her voice trembling slightly. Ellis' gaze was a mixture of affection and conflict. "Rosalie, you mean a lot to me, more than I ever thought possible. But now is not the right time," Rosalie added, a sad smile playing on her lips. Ellis nodded, guilt evident in her eyes. "I'm sorry. If there was any other way—" Rosalie took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. Part of her wanted to scream, to accuse Ellis of having used her, of having played with her feelings. But another part, the part that had grown and matured over the last few weeks, understood. "I understand, Alex," she finally said, her voice firm despite the pain in her chest. "You have a company to save, employees who depend on you. I can't be selfish." Ellis seemed surprised by her reaction. "Rosalie, She raised her hand, interrupting him. "No, please, don't make this harder than it already is." The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Rosalie. She vaguely remembered Ellis insisting on taking her home, the soft kiss he placed on her forehead before saying goodbye, promising that they would be in touch soon. Alone in her apartment, Rosalie finally allowed the tears to fall. She cried for the lost opportunity, for the romance that had barely begun before ending, for the dreams that seemed more distant than ever. But as the early hours of the morning progressed, something inside Rosalie began to change. Sadness gave way to fierce determination. Ellis might have postponed her plans, but he couldn't take away her talent, her passion. With the first rays of sunlight coming through the window, Rosalie got up, washed her face, and went into the kitchen. Her hands, which knew the way even in the dark, began mixing ingredients. As the scent of cinnamon and apples filled the apartment, Rosalie made a promise to herself. She would build her dream, with or without Ellis Reeves' help. New York would not defeat her so easily. The cake that came out of the oven that morning was more than just a sweet treat. It was a declaration of independence, an act of resistance against the fate that others were trying to impose on her. Rosalie Bennett, the Kansas girl with family recipes and a heart full of determination, was ready to write her own chapter in the city that never sleeps. And it would be a sweet story, with or without a happy ending alongside her billionaire prince. The days following the dinner with Ellis passed like a blur for Rosalie. The pain of rejection and the frustration of dreams deferred threatened to consume her, but she refused to give up. Each morning, she rose with the sun, determined to turn her disappointment into fuel for success. One sunny Tuesday, while walking through bustling Bryant Park, Rosalie had an epiphany. Watching the executives hurrying about with their takeaway coffees, she saw an opportunity. If she couldn't have her own bakery yet, why not take her pastries directly to customers? With renewed energy, Rosalie invested her savings in a small wheelbarrow, decorating it with vibrant colors and the name Rose's Souvenir Sweets. Her first attempts to sell in the park were disastrous. The New Yorkers, always in a hurry, barely gave her a second glance. But Rosalie was persistent. She perfected her sales pitch, created attractive packaging, and most importantly, kept improving her recipes. Little by little, people began to notice. A cookie here, a brownie there, and soon she had regular customers. Among her new admirers was Sophia Rodriguez, a young and ambitious journalist from the New York Chronicle. Intrigued by the story behind the delicious sweets, Sophia decided to do a story on Rosalie. "So, Rosalie," Sophia asked, sitting on a park bench savoring a lavender cupcake, "how does a girl from Kansas end up selling the best sweets in Manhattan from a cart?" Rosalie laughed, straightening her flowered apron. "It's a long story, Sophia. Let's just say that I've learned that sometimes you have to take one step back in order to take 2 steps forward." Sophia's story, published in the Chronicle's lifestyle section, was an instant hit. Suddenly, Rosalie's little cart was surrounded by curious customers, all eager to try the famous sweet souvenirs. As demand increased, Rosalie found herself working 18 hours a day, sleeping only a few hours before waking up to prepare a new batch of sweets. She was exhausted, but happy. Every sale, every smile from a satisfied customer was a small victory. As her fame grew, Rosalie couldn't stop thinking about Ellis. On the rare occasions she turned on the TV or flicked through a magazine, she saw his serious face in reports about the corporate battle he was facing. Part of her wanted to call, to offer support, but her pride stopped her. One particularly busy afternoon, while replenishing her stash of chocolate chip cookies, Rosalie noticed a man standing at a distance, watching her. Tall, with grey hair and an impeccable suit, he seemed out of place among the park's regulars. Intrigued, Rosalie waved, inviting him to come closer. "Hello, would you like to try some candy?" The man smiled, his blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Actually, Miss Bennett, I'd like to talk business." Surprised that he knew her name, Rosalie asked, "And you are—" "Forgive me, how rude. Michael Donovan, from Donovan Enterprises. I'm an old acquaintance of Ellis Reeves." Rosalie's heart leapt when she heard Ellis' name. "Oh, I see. What can I do for you, Mr. Donovan?" Michael smiled again, but this time there was something calculating in his gaze. "I'm impressed by your success, Miss Bennett. From a simple trolley to a local sensation in a matter of weeks. It's admirable." Rosalie blushed at the compliment, but remained cautious. "Thank you. It's been quite a journey." "I imagine so," Michael continued, his tone casual, but his eyes attentive. "And I also imagine that you must be eager to expand your business, perhaps open your own store." Rosalie hesitated, painfully remembering the postponed plans with Ellis. "Well, that's always been the dream," Michael stepped forward, lowering his voice. What if I told you I could make that dream come true? My company is always looking for promising talent to invest in. The offer was tempting, but something in Michael's tone made her uncomfortable. That's very kind of you, Mr. Donovan, but I'm quite satisfied with my current business. Michael's smile faltered for a moment. I see, but think about it, Miss Bennett. Opportunities like this don't come along every day, especially for someone with your background. The condescending tone in his voice made Rosalie straighten up, her chin raised in defiance. My background has brought me this far, Mr. Donovan, and it will continue to carry me forward. Michael laughed, but the sound was cold, calculating. You have spirit, I must admit, but be realistic. How long do you think you can go on like this? Winter is coming, and people aren't going to want to buy sweets from a cart in the snow. Michael's words, although harsh, touched on insecurities that Rosalie had been trying to ignore. He was right. What would she do when the weather changed? Seeing her hesitation, Michael handed over a card. Think about my offer. When you're ready for a real deal, give me a call. As she watched Michael walk away, Rosalie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. Something about that encounter had left her deeply disturbed. That night, in her small apartment, Rosalie couldn't sleep. Michael's words echoed in her mind, mixed with memories of Ellis, doubts about her future. Picking up her cell phone, she hesitated over Ellis' number. Should she warn him about Michael? But what would she say? Hi, your competitor showed up in the park and offered me a suspicious deal. With a frustrated sigh, Rosalie tossed the phone aside. No, she wouldn't run to Ellis for answers. She would find her own way. Getting up, Rosalie went to the kitchen. While her skilled hands mixed ingredients for a new recipe, her mind worked on a plan. Michael was right about one thing. She needed to prepare for winter. When the sun rose, he found Rosalie asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and sketches. Next to her, a new menu was taking shape. Winter Delights by Rose, a collection of warm and comforting sweets, perfect for the cold days ahead. Rosalie Bennett was ready to face her next battle, and this time she would be fighting not just for her dream, but for her independence. The girl from Kansas had grown up, and New York had seen nothing yet. Fall gave way to winter in New York, and with it came new challenges and opportunities for Rosalie. Her candy cart, now equipped with a small heater and decorated with festive lights, had become a point of comfort for New Yorkers, looking for a moment of sweetness in the bitter cold. The Winter Delights by Rose were an instant hit. Her mint brownies with embedded hot chocolate and cinnamon cookies with melted marshmallow filling quickly became legendary among Bryant Park goers. One particularly frosty December morning, while Rosalie was serving a steady line of customers, a familiar figure approached. Sofia Rodriguez, the journalist who had written the article about her months before, arrived panting, her eyes shining with excitement. Rose, you won't believe what I've discovered, Sofia exclaimed, pulling Rosalie aside. Intrigued, Rosalie asked her new assistant, Jake, a university student she had hired to help out at peak times, to look after the trolley for a few minutes. What's wrong, Sofia? Rosalie asked, worried by the urgency in her friend's voice. Sofia looked around, as if afraid of being overheard, before whispering, Do you remember that guy, Michael Donovan, who approached you a few weeks ago? Rosalie nodded, feeling a knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't forgotten the disturbing encounter with the businessman. Well, I was researching a story about hostile takeovers in the corporate world, and his name came up several times, Sofia continued, her words coming out quickly. Rose, he's not just an old acquaintance of Ellis Reeves, he's the main investor behind the attempted takeover of Ellis Company. The revelation hit Rosalie like a bucket of cold water. Suddenly, Michael's interest in her small business took on a sinister new meaning. But why would he be interested in me? Rosalie asked, confused. Sofia shrugged. I'm not sure, but I think he's trying to use you in some way against Ellis. Maybe as a distraction, or, she hesitated, or as a form of pressure. Rosalie felt her world spin. All those months, she had been striving to build something of her own, to prove her worth independently of Ellis. And now, she found that she was still somehow trapped in that corporate web. "What should I do, Sophia?" Rosalie asked, her voice trembling slightly. The journalist squeezed Rosalie's arm in a comforting gesture. "For now, nothing. Carry on with your business as if nothing had happened. I'll investigate further and keep you informed." As Sophia walked away, promising to return with more information, Rosalie returned to her trolley, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Jake gave her a worried look. "Everything all right, boss?" he asked. Noticing her troubled expression, Rosalie forced a smile. "Everything's fine, Jake. Just thinking about the future of the business." The next few weeks were a test of endurance for Rosalie. During the day, she kept her smile bright, charming customers with her sweets and her friendliness. But at night, in her apartment, she found herself lost in thoughts about Ellis, Michael Donovan, and the complex corporate world she had unwittingly become part of. On a particularly cold January evening, while Rosalie was experimenting with a new recipe for apple pie with salted caramel, her doorbell rang. Surprised by the late arrival, she opened the door to find a visibly dejected Ellis Reeves. "Alex!" she gasped, shocked by his appearance. The always impeccable businessman seemed to have aged years in just a few months. His eyes were deep-set, with deep dark circles under them, and his once confident posture was now bowed by the weight of invisible worries. "Rosalie," he said, his voice hoarse, "may I come in? We need to talk." Hesitating, Rosalie stepped aside, allowing Ellis to enter. The sweet aroma of pie in the oven filled the air, creating a surreal contrast to the palpable tension between them. "What's going on, Alex?" Rosalie asked, crossing her arms defensively. Ellis ran a hand through her tousled hair, a gesture Rosalie remembered well from their happier days together. "It's about Michael Donovan. He's using you, Rose." Rosalie felt a shiver run down her spine. "Using me? How?" "He's spreading rumors on the company board," Ellis explained, his voice laced with frustration, "saying that I embezzled funds to finance his business, that I'm having an affair with you to cover up suspicious transactions." The revelation left Rosalie stunned. "But this is ridiculous. We've barely spoken in the last few months." Ellis nodded sadly. "I know. But Donovan is clever. He found out about our previous involvement and he's using it against me." Rosalie felt a mixture of anger and hurt rise in her chest. "And you came here to ask me what, exactly? To deny everything, to disappear?" "No," Ellis exclaimed, taking a step towards her. "I came to warn you, to protect you. Donovan is dangerous, Rose. He won't hesitate to use you as a pawn in this game." For a moment, Rosalie saw a glimpse of the Ellis she had fallen in love with, concerned, protective. But then the memory of the pain he had caused her resurfaced. "I appreciate the warning, Alex," she said, her voice firm. "But I'm no longer that naive girl you knew. I can take care of myself." Ellis watched her for a long moment, a mixture of admiration and sadness in his eyes. "I know you can, Rose. You were always stronger than I deserved." Before Rosalie could reply, the oven timer sounded, breaking the tense moment. With a sigh, she turned to take the pie out of the oven. When she turned around again, Ellis was already at the door. "Just be careful, please," he said softly. "And if you need anything at all, just call me." As the door closed behind Ellis, Rosalie found herself alone again, the sweet scent of freshly baked pie mingling with the familiar perfume Ellis had left behind. That night, as the city slept under a blanket of snow, Rosalie stayed awake, her mind working furiously. She knew she was in the middle of something much bigger than her little candy business. But instead of feeling scared, she felt a fierce determination growing inside her. Did Michael Donovan want to use her sweets as a weapon in his corporate war? Well, he was about to find out that he had chosen the wrong target. Rosalie Bennett wasn't just a talented confectioner, she was a survivor, a fighter. With a determined smile, Rosalie began to plan her next move. The game was just beginning, and she was ready to show New York and the world what she was really capable of. The days following Ellis' visit were a whirlwind for Rosalie. While she continued to serve her loyal customers with a smile, her mind worked incessantly, devising a plan to protect herself and, perhaps, even turn the tables on Michael Donovan. One frosty February morning, Rosalie made a bold decision. Instead of waiting passively for Donovan's next move, she decided to confront him directly. With the help of Sophia, who used her journalistic contacts, Rosalie managed to arrange a meeting at the headquarters of Donovan Enterprises. Dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, a piece she had saved months to buy, Rosalie entered the imposing glass and steel building in the heart of Manhattan. Her heart was racing, but her determination was unwavering. "Miss Bennett," Michael Donovan greeted her with a cold smile as she entered his office on the top floor. "What a pleasant surprise. Have you finally decided to accept my offer?" Rosalie smiled back, but her eyes remained serious. "Actually, Mr. Donovan, I've come to make a different proposal." Intrigued, Donovan indicated a chair. "I'm all ears." Sitting down, Rosalie got straight to the point. "I know about your attempt to take over Ellis Reeves' company, and I know you're trying to use me as a pawn in that game." Donovan's smile faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "Impressive. I see I underestimated you, Miss Bennett." "Many people make that mistake," Rosalie replied calmly, "but I'm here to offer an alternative that can benefit us all." Donovan leaned forward, clearly interested. "Go on." "My business is growing rapidly," Rosalie explained. "I have a loyal customer base and exclusive revenues. What I need now is capital to expand." "And where do I come into that?" Donovan asked, arching an eyebrow. Rosalie smiled, feeling more confident. "I propose a partnership. You invest in my company, helping me to open my first physical store. In return, as well as a financial return, you gain an ally in the corporate world, a success story to add to your portfolio." Donovan leaned back in his chair, studying Rosalie with a new look of respect. "Interesting. But what about Reeves?" "My relationship with Ellis is strictly professional now," Rosalie said, keeping her voice steady despite the twinge of pain she felt. "Any rumors about a romantic or financial involvement are unfounded and can be easily disproved." For several minutes, Donovan remained silent, clearly pondering the proposal. Finally, he stood up and walked over to the window, watching the city below. "You know, Miss Bennett, when I approached you in that park, I saw only a small businesswoman who could be useful in my plans against Reeves," he said, turning to face her. "Now I see a shrewd and ambitious businesswoman, someone who could be a real partner." Rosalie felt a mixture of pride and caution at these words. "So, do we have a deal?" Donovan held out his hand. "We have an agreement. My lawyers will be in touch to iron out the details." As she shook Donovan's hand, Rosalie felt a mixture of triumph and apprehension. She had managed to turn a threat into an opportunity, but she knew she was entering a dangerous game. Leaving the building, Rosalie was surprised by a familiar figure waiting on the sidewalk. Ellis, looking even more tired than on his last visit, took a step towards her. "Rose," he said, his voice a mixture of concern and admiration. "What were you doing here?" For a moment, Rosalie considered lying, protecting Ellis from the truth, but she was no longer that girl who needed to be protected. "I made a deal with Donovan," she answered honestly. "He's going to invest in my business." Ellis paled. "Rose, you don't know what you're getting into. Donovan is dangerous. I know exactly what I'm getting into, Alex," Rosalie interrupted him gently. "And I know how to take care of myself." Seeing the determination in her eyes, Ellis seemed to age a few more years. "Just be careful, please, if you need anything." "I know where to find you," Rosalie added with a small smile. "Take care too, Alex." As she walked away, Rosalie felt the weight of Ellis' gaze on her back. A part of her wanted to turn around, run back into his arms, and forget all this madness. But she knew she couldn't. Not anymore. In the weeks that followed, Rosalie plunged headlong into her new challenges. With Donovan's investment, she was finally able to rent a small commercial space in Soho for her first physical store. Working tirelessly, she transformed the place into a cozy cafe confectionery, decorated with warm tones and the irresistible aroma of freshly baked pastries. Rose's Sweet Memories was about to become a reality. On the eve of the grand opening, while Rosalie was putting the finishing touches to the decorations, she received a cryptic message from Sophia. I've discovered something big about Donovan. We need to talk urgently. I'll meet you tomorrow after the opening." Her heart racing, Rosalie reread the message several times. What had Sophia found out? And how would this affect her plans? Looking around her store, at the dreams that were finally materializing, Rosalie felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had come so far, overcome so many obstacles, but something told her that her biggest battle was yet to come. That night, as the town prepared for bed, Rosalie stayed up, baking batch after batch of her famous cookies. Each batch was an affirmation of her determination, a reminder of everything she had sacrificed to get there. Tomorrow, when the doors of Sweet Memories of Rose opened for the first time, Rosalie would be ready to face any challenge, any revelation that fate had in store for her. Because she was no longer just the girl from Kansas with dreams of conquering New York. She was Rosalie Bennett, businesswoman, pastry chef, and above all, a survivor. And New York hadn't seen anything yet. The opening day of Sweet Memories of Rose dawned with a crystal blue sky, as if the universe itself was smiling down on Rosalie. From the early hours of the morning, a considerable queue was already forming outside the charming little shop in Soho, with customers eager to try the famous sweets that had conquered New York. Rosalie, dressed in an elegant emerald green dress and her custom-made apron, was frantically moving around the kitchen, putting the finishing touches to an elaborate tower of cupcakes that would be the centerpiece of the shop window. Her heart was racing, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. At 10 a.m. sharp, with a deep sigh, Rosalie unlocked the doors. The sound of the bells she had carefully hung announced the arrival of the first customer. To her surprise, none other than Sophia. "Rose!" the journalist exclaimed, hugging her friend tightly. "This is incredible! I'm so proud of you!" Rosalie smiled, genuinely happy to have Sophia there. "Thank you for coming, but I thought we'd meet later." Sophia's smile faltered for a moment. "Yes, about that. Things got a bit more complicated. But we'll talk about that later. Now it's time to celebrate." The next few hours passed in a blur of smiling faces, exclamations of delight, and the constant ringing of the cash register. Rosalie barely had time to breathe, running between the counter and the kitchen to keep the trays full and the customers happy. Around midday, when the bustle had died down a little, Rosalie finally had a moment to look at her achievement. The store was exactly as she had dreamed it would be, welcoming, charming, and full of life. Tears of happiness threatened to fall, but she held them back, determined to keep her composure. Her moment of peace was interrupted by the arrival of an imposing figure, Michael Donovan, accompanied by a retinue of suit-clad executives. "Miss Bennett," he greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "or should I say, businesswoman of the year. Impressive what you've achieved in such a short space of time." Rosalie forced a smile, feeling a twinge of discomfort. "Mr. Donovan, what a pleasant surprise. Thank you for coming." Donovan made a broad gesture, encompassing the entire store. "I'm just looking after my investment. And I must say, it looks like I've made an excellent choice." As Donovan and his associates sampled the sweets, making quiet comments and taking notes, Rosalie couldn't help but notice the worried look Sophia cast in their direction. The afternoon progressed, and finally, at 6 p.m., Rosalie turned the sign on the door to closed. Exhausted but exhilarated, she dropped into one of the chairs, watching Jake and the other staff clean up. "Boss, that was amazing," Jake exclaimed, his eyes shining with admiration. "We've sold almost everything." Rosalie smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. "Thank you, Jake. I couldn't have done it without you and the team." As the last employee left, Sophia, who had been standing discreetly in a corner, finally approached. Her face was serious, contrasting with the celebratory atmosphere. "Rose, we need to talk. Now?" Feeling the weight of her friend's words, Rosalie nodded, leading her into the small office at the back of the store. "What did you find out, Sophia?" Rosalie asked, as soon as she had closed the door. Sophia took a deep breath before beginning. "Donovan isn't just trying to take over Ellis Company. He's involved in a series of illegal deals, money laundering, bribery of public officials, you name it." Rosalie felt the blood run cold in her veins. How do you know that?" "I have a source inside his company," Sophia explained, her voice low and urgent. "Someone who is willing to testify. But Rose, the most important thing is, Donovan is using your store as a front for part of these operations." The revelation hit Rosalie like a punch in the gut. "What? But how? I didn't know any of this." Sophia put a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder. "I know, Rose, and that's why I came to warn you. You need to get away from him now." Rosalie felt the world spin around her. Everything she had worked so hard for, all her dreams, suddenly seemed to be falling apart. "But what about the store? The investment? I can't just—" she stammered, feeling the panic rising. Just then, a firm knock on the door interrupted them. Before they could react, the door opened, revealing Ellis Reeves. "Sorry to intrude," he said, his face a mask of concern. "But you need to see this." Ellis turned on the small TV in the corner of the office, tuning in to a news channel. The headline made Rosalie's heart stop. "Businessman Michael Donovan arrested on fraud and money laundering charges." The images showed Donovan being escorted out of his office in handcuffs. "This happened less than an hour ago," Ellis explained, his voice gentle. "Rose, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you about him." Rosalie felt her legs go weak and would have fallen over if Sophia hadn't supported her. What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellis approached, his eyes full of determination. "Now we fight. Together. I won't let you lose everything because of that bastard." At that moment, looking at Ellis and Sophia, Rosalie felt a wave of gratitude and renewed strength. She had faced challenges before, and she would overcome this one too. "Okay," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Where do we start?" As the three of them began to map out a plan of action, outside, the lights of New York began to come on. The city that never sleeps was about to witness another chapter in Rosalie Bennett's extraordinary journey. And this time, she wouldn't be alone in the fight. The weeks following Michael Donovan's arrest had been the most challenging Rosalie had ever faced. The store she had worked so hard to build was now at the center of a federal investigation, its accounts frozen and its future uncertain. But Rosalie Bennett was not someone who gave up easily. With Ellis' tireless help and Sophia's journalistic support, Rosalie plunged into a legal battle to prove her innocence and save her business. Sleepless nights were spent reviewing documents, preparing depositions and strategizing. On one particularly stressful afternoon, while going through piles of papers in her small office at the back of the closed store, Rosalie felt the weight of everything come crashing down on her shoulders. Silent tears began to stream down her face, staining the documents in front of her. It was at this moment that Ellis entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Seeing Rosalie crying, he dropped the cups and ran to her side. Hey, he murmured softly, wrapping her in a tight hug. "It's going to be all right, Rose. We'll get through this." Rosalie allowed herself to be comforted, her body shaking with restrained sobs. "What if it isn't, Alex? What if I lose everything? It's not fair. I've worked so hard." Ellis pulled away a little, holding Rosalie's face between his hands. His eyes, once always calculating and focused on business, now overflowed with tenderness and determination. "Listen to me, Rosalie Bennett," he said firmly. "You're the strongest, most resilient person I've ever met. You turned a candy cart into an empire in a matter of months. Donovan may have brought us down, but he hasn't beaten us. We'll rebuild together." At that moment, looking into Ellis' eyes, Rosalie felt something change inside her. The spark of hope she thought she had lost was rekindled, turning into a burning flame of determination. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and events. Donovan's trial revealed the extent of his crimes, and thanks to Sophia's investigative work and Ellis' legal cunning, Rosalie was completely cleared of any involvement. But the legal victory was only the beginning. With her accounts unblocked, Rosalie now faced the challenge of regaining her clients' trust and rebuilding her reputation. It was then that she had a brilliant idea. "Let's have a reopening event," Rosalie announced one evening, while she, Ellis, and Sophia were having dinner in her apartment. "But not just an ordinary reopening. We're going to turn it into a community celebration." Sophia's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. That's brilliant, Rose. I can see the headlines. From scandal to sweetness. How a pastry chef turned adversity into opportunity. Ellis smiled, clearly impressed. And we can use the occasion to launch a charity sweets line. A percentage of sales can go to local charities. The reopening event for Rose's Sweet Memories was much more than Rosalie could have dreamed of. The small store in Soho was unrecognizable, decorated with flowers, lights, and, of course, mountains of delicious sweets. But what really touched Rosalie's heart was seeing the queue that formed outside, not just of eager customers, but of people from the community who came to show their support. There were neighbors she didn't even know knew her name, loyal customers who had supported her since the days of the trolley in the park, and even a few famous faces, attracted by the story of overcoming that Sophia skillfully wove into her reports. When the time came to cut the ribbon and officially reopen the store, Rosalie found herself too emotional to speak. It was Ellis who stepped forward, holding her hand and addressing the crowd. "Today we're not just reopening a store," he began, his voice charged with emotion. "We're celebrating the triumph of the human spirit. Rosalie Bennett has shown us that with determination, integrity, and a little sugar, we can overcome any obstacle." The crowd erupted in applause, and Rosalie felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Looking at Ellis, she saw not only the shrewd businessman who had helped her navigate turbulent waters, but the man she was falling in love with all over again, this time in a deeper and truer way. In the months that followed, Rose's Sweet Memories not only regained its footing, but flourished beyond the most optimistic expectations. The charity candy line became a roaring success, with Rosalie being invited to TV shows and charity events. On a quiet evening, almost a year after the reopening, Rosalie and Ellis were walking hand in hand through Bryant Park, the place where it all began. Snow fell softly around them, transforming the city into a fairy tale setting. "You know," Rosalie said, stopping to look at Ellis, "a year ago I thought I'd lost everything, but now I realize that I've gained more than I ever thought possible." Ellis smiled, pulling her closer. "And what exactly did you win, Miss Bennett?" Rosalie laughed, her breath forming little clouds in the cold air. "Well, for a start, a successful store, a line of charity products, national recognition." Impressive," Ellis murmured, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Anything else?" Rosalie pretended to think for a moment before standing on tiptoe, her lips inches from Ellis. "Oh, and there's this amazing guy who stayed by my side throughout the storm. I think I'll stay with him too." When their lips met, it was as if the world around them disappeared. There in the heart of New York, Rosalie Bennett had finally found her home, not just in the city she had learned to love, but in the arms of the man who had helped her rediscover her strength. As they walked back to the store, where a surprise birthday party awaited them, secretly organized by Sophia and Jake, Rosalie reflected on her journey. From the Kansas girl with dreams of conquering New York to the resilient businesswoman who turned adversity into triumph, she had come a long way. And now, with the city sparkling around her and the future full of sweet possibilities, Rosalie knew that her story was far from over. In fact, this was just the beginning of an exciting new chapter. Because in New York, the city where dreams are made and remade every day, Rosalie Bennett finally found her own recipe for happiness, a perfect blend of love, determination, and, of course, a pinch of sugar.